Hello everyone, it's me, Coffee Stitcher. It is the first Sunday in December, we've got some stuff to show, some stuff to tell, a few questions to answer. We've got some coffee to drink. So how are y'all? It's most excellent. Ooh, this is good coffee this morning. Alright, so, first things first will be our Q&A. There is one tiny little bit of haul, and we've got whip updates, we've got my plans, a little bit of discussion for next year, and then a reminder about some stuff. So, let's get going. Woo! Alright, so the Q&A. Tracy Tillman asks, have I ever been to the French Knot in Fort Worth? Yes, I have. I don't go over there very often, partially because, and I'm assuming you're probably familiar with the area, the, parking there is not always ideal. Their hours aren't really conducive for me working-wise. The times I went over there was when I was dating, sorry, I had a pop-up, my really awful ex before I met my husband, and, so I just don't generally like going over to that area. So I vastly prefer Stitch Niche. That and French Knot is much more focused on needlepoint. So I go to Stitch Niche since it's cross-stitch. Brenda Greer asks, who is my favorite Oz character? That's kind of a little bit of a difficult question to answer. If we're talking from the full canon of Oz books, it's probably the Patchwork Girl. But or Glinda, either of those two. But if we're talking about, just the MGM film, then probably the Wicked Witch. Julicious asks, are you planning to do Brittany's Gargoyle Sal? That's the Ingleside Imaginarium, Guardians of Notre Dame. I'm definitely going to buy it. I don't know how well I'll do at actually keeping up with it, but I'm definitely going to buy it, because it looks awesome. I'm also very tempted by Eric's, of Ship's Manor Sal for next year, but we'll see. Lori Sciccolone asks, do you FFO your projects yourself? Sometimes. If I do, like, a No-So Cube, like I did for my Scooby-Doo, if I do those, oh, pardon me. If I do it like that, then generally, yes, I will. Those I can do with no problem. When it comes to framing, no. I have professionals do that. I'm not even going to attempt to go there. Joanne Stitching G Gammy K wants to know, how do you start a rotation? A rotation is, it's kind of a personal thing. What I did is I usually set about 10 whips that I really like that I want to work on the most. And then I set a specific goal, and then when I reach that goal, then I move to the next one. It's generally how I start. That's how I started mine. Beaker Sanute asks, is it possible to show on a video what you mean by 1/1 and 2/2? And yes, when I get to Longfellow's Round Tower here in a moment, I can show you very clearly. Christine Tyler asks, what is the difference between over-dyed floss and hand-dyed floss? Does it just mean that one is variegated and one isn't? No, not necessarily. Hand-dyed floss is when you take white floss and you dye it by hand. Really, anything that's hand-dyed is going to be, is immediately classified as hand-dyed. It just means it was dyed by hand. Overdyed is where you take an existing, like say I wanted to use, we've got what here, DMC 902. So there's DMC 902. But I wanted it to be a little darker, so I overdye it with some black to get a darker color. That's overdyeing. It can be a solid overdye, or it can also be a variegated overdye. It just sort of depends. So overdyed means it was an existing color that was dyed over, whereas hand-dyed can mean anything. And generally with hand-dye as well, it's going to be just a white floss, but not always. But generally, yes. Lori Graffor asks, how do I keep track of stitching in my notebook? Also, goals or projects for 2018. Well, we're a little early for me to be figuring out the 2018. Not much, but a little. What I do is, and I did not bring it in here with me because I'm a moron, but what I do is I just have a journal, I write what the WIP is, I write what my goal is, and that's it. I think I'm going to try and be a little more organized about it next year, so that I can include the different Stitch Mania sals and things like that. And I'm kind of leaning towards next year doing something a little different in the first quarter. We'll talk about that right now, I guess. And I'm calling it the screw it method, which is, screw it, this is what I want to work on, this is what I'm going to do. And then when I'm tired of working on it, I'm going to move. We'll see how long I stick with that. Probably won't, because I already have had one minor anxiety attack about it. So we may still stick with just the rotations. Rose City Stitcher asks, what fabric are you planning on using for the Primitive Hair Beatrix Potter? I'm going to have to look back at my chat with Sarah, because I somehow missed this question when I was doing my what things do I need to gather. Here we go. It was in a Stitchy box. It is Vintage Light Exemplar from Lakeside Linens. So that's what I'm going to be using for it. Ruby Athena asks, what sort of process do you use when planning goals for the month year? Starting to plan my stitching for 2018. For my monthly goals, like I kind of already said, I look at the pattern itself, I look at where I'm at, and then I make that decision. So, and we'll just go ahead and do, this one. So you're not going to get a goal on this one when I get into the rest of them. But on my, Fall Splendor, so here's Fall Splendor. So last month, when I started it, I did the first 3 bands. So there we go, those are the first 3 bands. So looking at this, I think a fair goal is going to be to do the next 2 bands. So I can easily achieve those, and then I will probably go ahead and I may start the tree. Keyword may. Or I may just do those 2 bands. We'll see. Kind of depends on how I'm feeling when I get there. So, hopefully that answers your question. What I basically do is I just look to see where I'm at on the piece, and what I think I can accomplish in the month successfully. All right, and I believe that is all of the questions. So, One downside to long hair is getting it in your coffee. Alright, so my one piece of haul this week, it's another shepherd's bush. It's called Santa Berry Pudding. There it is. And it says, Santa comes on Christmas Eve, seeking those who yet believe, through a frosty winter's night, in a sleigh with reindeer flight, bringing joy to large and small, Merry Christmas, one and all. And it's actually meant to be done on 16 count linen. I am not doing it on that. It's got Mill Hill buttons, so I'm hoping I can maybe find some from, like, just another button company or something a little smaller, because I really don't want to do it that big, but if I have to, I will. So there's that. I thought it was super cute, and it was like $2. Okay, so moving right along, we'll do our whip updates. So, as you know, I was starting Legend of the Blue Sea by Soda Stitch, and I got... we'll do it this way. I got the top half done. So there she is. The places where you see see fabric through there and up at the top, those are actually I'm gonna use pearls, so those will be added at the end. I'm not stitching the sand or the shell, so it's just gonna be her and the fish and the bubbles, and the seaweed. So that's her. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna try and stitch on her this month, since I got this far on her, but if I do, it'll be, I will work on the tail. The tail will be the next step. And really and truly, I may just try and go ahead and finish her on out, because there's not all that much to her when you don't do the shell. I did a little bit of what I'm calling, finish up what you're doing. At the end of last month, so I worked on the Jardin Privé, Alice au Pays des Merveilles, and I gave her hair, so she is no longer bald. This is on Chloris from Under the Sea Fabrics. So I will, my goal next month on her is to, stitch up the Cheshire Cat. So there's the design. So I'm going to try and do the Cheshire Cat and maybe some of the stuff down here. I'm not really sure yet. Okay. Then we worked on everyone's favorite, and mine, and this is going to be the one I'm going to come back to after this video is over. I finished page 3 of Longfellow's Round Tower, so we're a third of the way done. There it is. This is on 32 count Garrett's Time Machine from Die Stitch Love. And for, I think it was Pam, was it? Rose City Stitcher. The difference, obviously on Legend of the Blue Sea, I decided not to do over one skin. Okay, so 2 over 2 is what you do most of the time on your stitching. So that's all 2 over 2. But see these little tiny hummingbirds? Those are 1 over 1. Same thing with the pennants here. And what it is it's where instead of doing 2 strands over 2 threads, you do 1 strand over 1 thread. Now, sometimes people will do 2 strands over 1 thread, and they'll do a 10th stitch, because that goes faster. But that's kind of personal opinion there. I generally do so little over 1 stitching that I don't mind doing the full thing. So page 4 is next. My goal on page 4 is going to be to do the border part that's there, because this border part's easy, as well as the bottom half of the tower. I'm gonna wait on the words. So I'm gonna do this a little differently than I normally would. I would normally go for a page finish. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to finish out the tower along the bottom and its border, because I think I want to find a variegated black-blue that looks sort of inky to do the wording, but I want to be able to do the wording all at once so that depending on how variegated I go. So we'll see. But that's going to require a trip to Stitch Niche. I am doing Stitch from Stash next year, though, and I am going to try not to fall off the wagon this time. And then last but not least, I worked on Vintage Birds, which I love working on. It is a little... It's weirdly dense. So I worked on the left-hand side of the big flower, and I filled in the bottom part of the flower, and I did the left-hand side and its bird. So next month I'll do the other bird, the other side, and then we've got the big flower in the middle. So, but I do love this, and I do love working on it. It's going to be super pretty when it's done. Even if my fabric is a little weirdly stretched right now. But, that happens. There we go. Boop. So that's going to be, since I did this one this month, so that's it probably for this month. Because we do have plans for a new start, maybe. Or two. Or God only knows with me. Okay. So you saw the Fall Splendor plan. On Summer Patchwork, Gypsy Hearts is actually at work. I left my stitching bag there. But Gypsy Hearts, my goal on it is going to be to finish out all the white at work. And then once I've done that, well, maybe we'll see. But my goal on Summer Patchwork is obviously to do the border around the flower basket. And then probably those 3 hearts and that big heart. And then maybe the cupcake. So, that's kind of the thought process right now. But it's going to mean first that I have to finish the, I have to do the border around the outside. My goal on my stocking that I'm working on is going to be to finish out at least the tunic. If not, maybe the full Santa. So, there's where we are on the tunic. So I got, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 big red sections left to go, and then 1 not quite as big. So, yeah. I do want to go ahead and get the rest of the Lizzie Kate Spirit of Christmas charts, so I can start figuring out how to chart in a verse I do like. Because I want to work on it, but I'm kind of at a point where it's like, well, I've done everything but that I can without doing the verses. So, and then on good old giant Harry Potter, we're gonna work on we're gonna work on Chamber of Secrets, maybe part of the border. So, there we go. Or I may work on border and wait on Chamber of Secrets. We'll see. So, there you go. That is where we are at for goals for this month. Okay, so as some of you probably saw, but in case you didn't, we are doing I've created a group specifically for it, but it's the Sew to Stitch Fairy Tales Stitch Along group starting January 1st. It is not part of Mania. It is just kind of me doing it. Any of the fairy tale charts are applicable. It's a little more specific than the Mania saddles because these are for a specific designer and a specific type. But please feel free to join it. We'll start on the 1st. I've got my fabric ordered, and we'll go from there. So please, everyone come join. Like I said, I am doing Stitch from Stash for next year, so we will see how I do on that. I don't currently have any plans to join any of the yearly sales. I do like the idea of the Clouds Factory one. But I think one of my focuses this year is I'm going to finish the 2 pumpkin ones I've already got started. Before I start any more of, like, the yearly sales. Now, we'll see how well I do with this, but that's the current plan. So, because I'm over halfway on one of them, and I'm halfway on the other. And if anyone would like to sell part of those with me, please feel free, because it definitely helps me. On ones like that, it really helps me to have someone who I'm doing it with. So please feel free to join me. So, anyhow, I guess that's kind of it for me this week. If you've got any questions, please don't be afraid to ask, because as we all know, I love me some questions. And I will see you all next week.